How's your day? Oh my God, it's so
Oh,
tired
yes.
already. It's so hot outside.
What are-
No,
Run,
no,
real
but I
quick.
was on the
Are they bringing it in right
motorcycle
now?
and it's
Oh,
just
go, you have to go to the restroom?
parked at headquarters.
Before I have it together.
It's all the
Sure.
construction, so it's a little detour.
Because I have to set this
Not
up
walking over
anyway.
here. Yeah, just that. And then you come in, you're like, gotta look nice and not look like you're a sweaty pig or something.
Used to be a former judge. Once a judge, always a judge. I remember the rules.
Okay, you can bring them in. Oh, you haven't, oh, just a second. He-
Right, they're cleaning them.
Okay.
Have you come from something? You should put anything to that. They're finished.
That's what they said. They probably will.
They got 5
They've got
witnesses,
a couple of more minor witnesses.
and then the other.
I can get you there. I'm guessing same now. Procedural officer and the detective.
So then.
The only one is.
But she can't test.
We will be allowed to go home early, but we're gonna make sure we pass traffic, you're in charge, then you come in the morning, just. Oh, I mean, if you got within 8 feet, it's gonna be a compliment, past Curve, and he's living on his own. I don't want her thinking we forgot about us. Then that will be a story that she can tell on 2020 or 60. But her face would be, I mean, it would just see, you know.
Ready, Jim?
Yes, we're ready.
All right, jury.
See, as Thomas, the ones are still in place for everyone. Very prepared. All right, everyone. I hope that everyone had a nice lunch and it wasn't too hot outside. All right, we're still on, I believe, recross.
All right, Mr. Stevenson.
We were speaking with Officer Sandoval, and right before our break, I believe that Officer Sandoval was reading from a 2-year-old police report. And he testified as to possible use of force. Was there use of force in your police report by my defendant?
No, there wasn't.
So anything that may have been stated right before we broke the lunch would have been a simple error. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
No further questions.
All right, State, any further questions?
No further questions, Your Honor.
Is this witness excused or subject to recall?
Excuse from the state.
At this point, we're going to say subject to recall, but we will probably not need it. But at this point, for safety's sake, I'll say subject to recall.
All right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you cannot discuss your testimony with anyone. The only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state and defense. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, State, call your next witness.
State calls Linda Whitty.
All right, if you'll take a seat here, please. Could you raise your right hand for me? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, you can lower your hand, and if you will adjust the chair up to the length you want it. And if you could state your name for the record,
Linda Whitty.
and just make sure you keep your voice up so that the court reporter and the jurors can hear. All right, State.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Whitty. How are you employed?
I am a registered nurse, sexual assault nurse examiner.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your training and experience. What are the steps to become a certified sexual assault nurse examiner?
First of all, you have to have a license, a registered nurse in the state of Texas, and to be a SANE in Texas. And you have to be a registered nurse for 2 years with experience in trauma, and then go through the SANE training. The SANE training consists of 80 hours of classroom, and then there's a series of things that you have to go through. 16 hours of courtroom experience, 8 sexual assault exams, 10 speculum exams, and then we spend time with an OB-GYN doctor. And that is to get the initial certification by the state of Texas.
Okay, and so we've been hearing and we're using the word SANE. Is that an abbreviation for something?
It is. SANE stands for Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner.
And so you said all those things that you talked about were to get the initial certification.
Correct.
And what do you have to do in order to maintain that certification?
So we have to recertify every 2 years, and that is separate from our registered nurse licensure. We do 20 hours of education minimum, with 8 hours of that being case reviews, 10 sexual assault exams.
Okay. And as far as you being a SANE, how long have you been a SANE?
I've been a SANE for 13 years.
And has it always been here in San Antonio?
No, it has not.
Previous to becoming or being a SANE here in San Antonio, where were you a SANE at?
I did my initial training and then worked as a SANE in Midland, Texas and West Texas.
Okay. How long were you a SANE out in Midland?
Approximately 2 years.
Okay. And then when did you come to San Antonio?
2011.
Okay. And have you been a SANE since 2011?
I am still a SANE, correct.
So since 2011 till today, your only profession is a SANE.
Correct.
As far as where you're currently employed, what hospital do you work out of?
We are at Methodist Specialty and Transplant Hospital.
If you can, just for the jury's sake, generally describe what is the purpose of a SANE, right? Or a SANE exam?
The purpose of a SANE exam is to give comprehensive care to the patient that has been sexually assaulted. Along with that, taking care of the psychosocial needs, the safety needs, as well as taking a narrative that leads to the SANE exam itself, which is a medical forensic exam.
In your years as a SANE nurse, how do you know about approximately how many SANE exams you have completed?
Over 1,350.
When, as far as making records in this case, or in any case, when you're doing your examination, do you make a record and keep a record as it relates to that examination?
Yes, I do.
And are you the custodian of records of those records?
Yes, I'm one of the custodian of the records. I'm a custodian of my own record.
And did you bring some records here with you today?
I did.
And are those records that you brought with you today, are you the custodian of those records?
I am.
And do those records relate to a patient by the name of Sarah Bundariano?
They do.
And are those records, are they kept in the ordinary course of business of Methodist Specialty and Transplant Hospital?
Yes.
And at the time, at or near the time that those records are made, do you have knowledge of the events that are occurring?
Yes.
So you're making notations within the record as you're noting them.
Yes.
And these records contain your personal observations.
They do.
They contain like things like medical history and results of certain the exam.
They do.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Is it okay if I staple these records together?
Yes.
Is that going to change within in the records?
No. I didn't know who you were asking.
I'm sorry. So I'm showing what you brought with you, which I have marked as State's Exhibit number 7 for identification purposes. Those are the excuse me, those are the records that we just spoke about, right?
They are.
And when was the examination on Sarah Bundariano complete?
March the 30th, 2020.
Your Honor, at this time, state would move to admit State's Exhibit number 7, tendered to defense for objections to any as previously tendered in electronic discovery.
No objection.
All right, State's Exhibit number 7 is admitted.
That's what what is the purpose of taking a medical history when in the context of a SANE exam?
The medical history will alert me to things to look out for. Side effects of some of the medicines she may be on, some of the physical things I may see because of her medical history.
And it's taking a history important for an accurate medical treatment and diagnosis.
It is.
So did you take a history from from Sarah in this case?
Do you mean the medical history?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
And as far as, is there a difference in types of histories that you're taking?
There is.
Okay. Can you describe for the jury the difference in those, I guess, the two types of histories?
So the medical history is asking what medical problems she has had in the past. I ask also what surgeries she's had, what pregnancies. And then we also call the history the narrative. And that is writing down what she says happens, what she said happened. And then that leads me into knowing where to look for trauma, where to look for evidence.
So in talking about it, I think you called it a narrative, that part of the history about what has happened to her. Did you take that as well from Sarah?
I did.
Okay. And again, is that narrative, the narrative history, is that important in making an accurate medical treatment and diagnosis?
Very important.
When you get a history from, and I should say, let's start at the beginning of the same exam. What is the first step when somebody is brought to Methodist Specialty and Transplant Hospital for a voluntary SANE exam?
The first thing is that they're seen medically in the emergency room. They're seen by a physician, and any injury that needs to be treated gets treated. Anything that needs to be x-rayed, any lab work that needs to be done, and then she or he gets offered prophylaxis for sexually transmitted diseases and anything else that needs to be done medically. We consult with the doctor on what needs to be done in that case. Once she is cleared medically, then we do the forensic exam.
So when you get to the forensic exam, what's the first step?
So we always have, we do it as a team. We get an advocate from Rape Crisis Center and a chaplain. So there's 3 people on the team in the room. And then the first thing is to get consent from her. And it is consent to obtain evidence and turn it over to law enforcement. And that's the first page of this record. And then when it comes to the history, what I tell her is, tell her or him, I say, this is where you are painting the picture for law enforcement and you're painting the picture for me. And this tells me where to look for evidence, where to look for trauma. I'll try not to interrupt you. The only reason I would interrupt you would be to ask you to slow down. And then I write down word for word in quotes what she says.
Okay. So after you take a history, if I'm understanding your testimony correctly, then that will guide your examination.
It does. After the history, we do the head to toe assessment.
So in this case, what specifically about her history, I guess, guided your examination?
Specifically, she did not in her story she did not say that there was any penile vaginal penetration. So that led me to not do a genital exam on her.
So in this case, you did not do a genital exam.
Correct.
So in her allegations, if you need to refer to your record, please do. What type of sexual contact, if any, did she allege?
There was penile oral, his penis in her mouth.
Okay. And in talking with her, were you able to get an estimated time frame of when that happened?
I was.
Okay. And is getting that time frame important for medical treatment and diagnosis, as well as any potential biological evidentiary value?
It is.
Why is that?
For evidence, it's important because in the oral cavity in the mouth, evidence can be destroyed or passed on quite rapidly because of saliva, because of eating, because the mouth is continually being washed and cleaned. So that's forensically. And also because if I do see injury, I need to know the time frame. There are certain injuries that you could see in the mouth.
In this case, if you could remind the jury, what date did you see her on?
March the 30th,
And you're approximately what time?
1600, which is 4 p.m. in the afternoon.
And so based on her coming in, were you able to determine by hours approximately how many hours had elapsed since the sexual assault?
18 hours.
18 hours in this case, based on her statement. I want you to back up for a second. Are there things that would affect any collection or possible collection of biological evidence
There are many things that can affect that collection.
as it relates to penile oral penetration? What things are you looking at that might guide you as to whether you expect to find any biological evidence?
Time that has passed, whether she's brushed her teeth, whether she's used mouthwash, whether she's eaten, whether she's had fluid.
Okay. And in this case, did any of those things exist that might change what you might expect to receive as far as evidence?
She had fluid.
Okay. So in this case also, did she tell you whether the perpetrator had ejaculated?
She did tell me.
Okay. And what did she say about that?
He ejaculated in her mouth.
So taking her narrative history of having 18 hours previously had somebody ejaculated in her mouth and then having fluids in that 18 hours, in your, was it 1,300 stain exams, based on your training experience, would you expect to find biological evidence?
I would not, but I went ahead and tried anyway because that is the only place that she said there had been exposure.
Okay. So you're still going to take a swab,
Yes,
but that is just in hopes that there might be something.
correct.
But from what I'm understanding, you wouldn't expect to.
I would not.
As far as any other type of sexual contact, did she make any other types of allegations?
In her narrative, she did. There was some touching outside of the clothing. So therefore, I did not do an exam underneath the clothing.
So did you take any other swabs in this case?
I did.
Okay. And where on her body did you take these swabs?
Perioral, which means around the mouth, her left cheek, her left breast, and her neck, and her abdomen on the left side.
As far as the perioral swabs, is that something you would do in every case?
If there has been penile contact or even mouth-to-mouth contact because of saliva and semen that could be around the mouth and doesn't always get washed off from eating or drinking.
Okay. So is that why you took that swab?
It is, and also because of what she said.
What did she say that also made you take that swab?
He kissed me on my mouth and my left cheek.
So moving on to the next swab, which would be the left cheek swab. Is that the reason that you took that particular swab?
It is.
As far as the left breast swabs, why did you take those swabs?
She said, quote, he kissed my breast.
Okay. And so moving on to the neck swabs, why did you take neck swabs?
Quote, he kissed my neck.
Okay. And then finally going on to the left abdomen swabs.
Quote, he kissed me there.
Out of all of the history that you took in the mechanism of, kissing, mouth, oral contact there, would you necessarily expect any of these to leave some type of biological evidence?
Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't.
Okay. So the fact that biological evidence is not there does not mean that something didn't happen.
Correct.
As far as kind of going back to how you conduct these examinations, you first do the consent, right? And then you take a medical history and then a narrative history, and that guides your actual physical examination, right?
Correct.
So in this case, is there anything else about her physical examination that you completed?
I looked with an alternate light source.
And what's the point of looking with an alternate light source?
So an alternate light source is like a black light, but it operates on a different wavelength. And what you're doing is wiping out, blocking some of the light so that other light might fluoresce. Fluoresce means to shine. It shines under the light. And what we're looking for is dried secretions to know where to swab.
And then after you do the alternative light source, you collect any other evidence or potential evidence in this case?
I do.
And what type of evidence are you trying to collect?
So I do my exam, physical exam, head to toe, and I collect evidence at the same time. So I collect the oral, that means in the mouth, swab first, because I'm trying to get foreign DNA. Then I will come back in about 15 minutes to collect the buccal swab, which is scraping the inside of her cheeks. That's getting her DNA to compare with what I might find. And then I look for injury. Back up a little bit, I look under the alternate light source first, and then I do the head to toe assessment. And then I look for injuries. I'm looking in the eyes and the ears, looking for signs of trauma, looking in the back of the mouth and the throat, moving down, looking for bruises, looking for scratches, abrasions, all the way head to toe. In this case, I did not do the genital exam.
So after you've done that physical examination of her, other than the swabs that we've already talked about, did you collect any other evidence in this case? Or
I
potential
did.
evidence? What was that?
She had changed her clothing, but I kept her bra and her white blouse.
Okay. In your SANE record, I believe that it is on page 3 of 6, when it refers to treatment provided. It notates that there's antibiotic prophylaxis that was given. What can you explain just generally what is an antibiotic prophylaxis?
This is to prevent the patient from getting sexually transmitted diseases, gonorrhea, chlamydia.
Was she administered prophylaxis in this case?
She was.
And again, that was, I guess, how many prophylactics was she given?
She was given 3 different antibiotics as well as medicine to keep her from getting nauseated from those antibiotics.
And is that pretty standard based on the history that you were given in this case?
Yes, it is.
So at what point is that treatment provided?
That is in the emergency room before she gets to me.
In dealing with in your training experience and history of working on these types of cases, how have you found that victims always react in the same way?
No,
And when you talk with the victims, and just very, very broadly speaking, when you get narrative histories from them, do they always have the same demeanor?
they do not. Their demeanors differ as much as their stories do.
If somebody were to have a flat affect or demeanor, is that something that you've come across within your practice?
Many times.
Is that consistent based on your history with somebody who's been sexually assaulted?
It is.
In this case, when you talked with Sarah, do you remember what her demeanor was like?
I do.
What was it like?
I documented she was alert, oriented, soft-spoken, relates history without difficulty. I remember Sarah when I saw her pictures, and I remembered that she did have a flat affect. I can't document flat affect because they want us to document what you actually see, and flat is not a very descriptive term, but I remembered that she did not show a great deal of emotion.
And in your history, is that concerning with necessarily her veracity for truthfulness?
Not at all.
And was her affect similar to patients you've dealt with in the past?
Yes, everyone is different. It's like every person has a cocktail of neurohormones that are released during the time of crisis. Your cocktail is different than mine, different than hers, different from everyone. And one person may laugh. I tend to laugh under crisis. That is oxytocin. Another person may show no emotion at all. Some fight. You've heard of fight and flight. There's also fawn. I'll do anything I can to survive this. And there's freeze. And a person doesn't have control over how he or she is going to respond in that moment.
So in your history in dealing with people, is it your experience that most victims fight back?
No,
Is it within your practice most frequent that they run?
you see a little bit of everything, but I think the most frequent is freeze.
Okay. And by freeze, what specifically do you mean by that?
Sometimes they don't say anything. They just don't move.
So after you finish collecting, you do your physical examination, you collect the clothing, what do you do next?
I assess what the needs are. So I'm now thinking about what resource she's going to need, what her safety, and I'm also evaluating the stability. So often when they do freeze or they do anything but run, they feel guilty, like it's all their fault. So I'm dealing with those emotions and trying to help them understand and put this crisis in perspective.
Judge, at this time, I'll pass the witness.
Defense.
Ma'am, are you, my name is Anthony Cantrell, and I represent this young man here sitting next to me. You don't really know anything about him today, do you?
I do not.
So as a SANE nurse, are you a registered nurse also?
I am.
And how long have you been a nurse?
40 years.
Thank you for your service to our community.
Thank you.
So you start out initially by doing assessment of a person that comes in, right?
Yes,
And take a brief history of what happened. Of why she's there.
yes,
Okay, and then eventually you'll do a medical history.
yes.
So your job is not to decide if somebody's telling the truth or not. Your job essentially is a fact taker, writing down what you see, taking down the history, and you're not there to determine if someone's lying or telling the truth. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
So when you took the brief history under number 2 of your report, and you can refer to your report at any time if you'd like to. And if ever I ask a question, you need a little more time to answer it by looking at your report, just please ask and take all the time you need.
Thank you.
So when Sarah gave you this brief history of what had happened, she never at once told you that someone forced her to have oral sex with someone. Isn't that right?
Give me time.
Yes, ma'am.
May I read the narrative, or how do you want me
Just
to
answer
answer?
the question. You can look at your report, and I asked you, did Sarah ever give you a history that someone forced her to give oral sex on another person?
Yes.
And what is it?
He wanted sex. I said no.
Now, where do you find that in that someone forced her to have oral sex? It's not
He-
there, is it?
He asked me to do things. I said, no, I'm not going to do that.
Okay, where does
Eventually,
it,
I
ma'am?
did give him oral
Ma'am?
sex.
Where did it say someone forced her to give oral sex?
In this quote, no, I'm not going to do that. Eventually, I did give him oral sex. He finished. in
Answer my
mouth.
question again, nurse.
I'm answering your question.
Okay.
I don't know
where-
how else to answer your
Where
question.
does it say that she said someone forced her to give oral sex on that person?
On the
I'm gonna
7th
object-
line down,
I'm going to object to ask and answer.
All right, that will be overruled.
Where does it say the term forced to give oral sex? Where is that in that statement?
no, I'm not going to do that. Eventually, I did give him oral sex. He finished in my mouth.
Okay, so nowhere there does it say someone forced me to give oral sex. Isn't that true?
The word force is not here, but she
Thank you
said,
very
no,
much.
I'm not going to do that.
Understood.
Eventually, I did give
But
him oral sex.
people say no all the time and then eventually decide to do something. Wouldn't you agree?
No means no.
Understood. But no means no, and then it can change to, okay, I'll do it. Right? I'm asking you that. as
I
a
can
general
only say
question.
what she told me. No, I'm not going to do that. Eventually, I did give him oral sex.
Okay, and nowhere did it say he forced me to give him oral sex.
The word force is not used there.
All right, thank you. Now you go on to, now this is 18 hours later, right?
Yes, it is.
All right, so did she take a bath?
No, she did not.
Did she shower?
She did not.
Did she brush her teeth?
She did not.
Did she use any mouthwash?
She did not.
So those were good signs, hoping that you might find a result if it was there, right?
We asked those things no matter what. We ask those questions no matter what the history is, because we don't leave blanks, and it leads me to look for evidence.
So the question was that if you're hoping to find evidence, you would want someone who hasn't bathed, showered, or brushed their teeth or used mouthwash. Isn't that right, ma'am?
That increases the chances of getting evidence.
Was their underwear changed?
No,
So at some point, you started doing a medical exam, correct? That's what you testified to.
head to toe physical assessment.
Yes, ma'am. Did you find any injuries on her body anywhere?
I did not.
So that would be consistent with no trauma, isn't that correct?
I did not see trauma on her physical body.
No bruising, correct?
I did not see trauma.
No laceration,
There was no lacerations.
so one of the things that after someone has a history of being ejaculated on is that you would do an assessment to see if you can find that. Isn't that correct?
Correct.
And one of the tools you use was a fluorescent light type instrument.
Correct.
And that's to detect the presence of sperm. Isn't that right?
Dried secretions could be sperm, could be saliva, could be sweat.
Some type of DNA maybe.
No, dried secretions that would contain DNA. Yes.
Okay. And you did on the history you received, checked for presence of, let's just call it bodily fluids. On Sarah's left cheek, anterior cheek, left breast, and left abdomen, correct?
Correct.
And you found no evidence of any bodily fluids on those areas, did you? Did you not?
That is not correct.
What did you find?
On the swabs on the neck, it did fluoresce and it disappeared with swabbing.
Okay. So you found something, but you don't know what it was.
Correct.
But on those other areas, you did not find anything.
There was no fluorescence.
Did you also, were those the swabs that you turned in for DNA testing?
Yes, they were.
Did you happen to get those results?
I do not get those results.
You never looked at them?
I don't get those results.
Do you know how to read a DNA test?
I do not.
But you're familiar with scientific terms as a nurse for 40 years, right?
I'm not an expert in DNA, but the results go to the crime lab gets the results. It goes to the detective and we do not get the results.
Understood. But you can read and write the English language, right?
Of course.
My approach the witness, Your Honor.
Yes.
Nurse Whitty, would you take a few minutes, please, to just refresh your memory on those, on that report? And if you could,
I cannot refresh my memory. I've not seen this.
well, I'm asking you to look at
To
it.
look at it,
Yes,
not refresh,
please.
but look at it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for correcting me. I appreciate it.
Okay.
And Can you tell us where those results, the lab was that those results came from?
Bear County Criminal Investigation Laboratory.
Do you have any reason to doubt their authenticity?
I do not.
Can you tell the jury whether or not those were consistent with the swabs that you turned in?
They are.
And can you tell this court what the findings of the DNA findings with respect to the results of the swabs that you turned in?
Judge, I'm going to object from her reading from a document that's not been admitted, as well as the lack of foundation.
No, no, I'll
Sustained.
tender to state. Your Honor, at this time, we tender defendant's exhibit number 1 for jury review.
Are you offering it into evidence?
Yes.
Judge, this lacks foundation. This is not the proper witness. She has no knowledge of any of
May I
it.
see defense exhibit number 1, please? All right, with regards to defense exhibit number 1, states objection will be sustained.
With respect to the evidence received, and I'm talking about the oral swabs and the debris collection and a known standard. Would that be what you had submitted for testing at the Bear County Criminal Investigation Lab?
I did.
And this is the first time you've seen that.
It is.
And so are you surprised that all the DNA testing results were negative?
No, I'm not.
So you're telling me that after Sarah, who had not showered, who had not bathed, who had not washed her teeth or brushed her teeth, and who testified that the perpetrator kissed her neck, her abdomen, and breast, which you would think if someone did those things, they would leave saliva on those areas. That no DNA was found. Is that what you're going to tell this jury?
What's your question?
My question is that Sarah told you that she had not bathed after this alleged incident occurred, accusing my client of this, that she had not brushed her teeth, taken a shower, and then not changed her underwear, and that she claims that my client kissed her on the neck, in the mouth, ejaculated in her mouth, kissed her abdomen, and all those areas that you took swabs of. The DNA test came back negative to my client. That's what you saw, isn't it? When you read
That's what
this?
the report says.
Okay.
What, is that your question?
Yes, that's what the report said.
Yes.
So that's certainly very strong evidence that this man didn't do that. Isn't that right, ma'am?
No, it is not.
Okay.
We often
That-
do not.
That's fine. I respect your opinion. But you will agree with me that DNA evidence is very important in a case.
The DNA evidence as well as the narrative itself is the most important piece of evidence.
Well, that's surprising. I thought you would say as your job that the medical examination would be the most important piece of information. Isn't that right?
You can't say one evidence is more important than the other. The
But that's what you
narrative is
just
a
said.
very important piece of evidence, as well as the physical evidence that we get.
I understand, nurse. I mean, this is your job. You do this all the time, and I'm sure you see a lot of cases that are disturbing to you. But your job is to assess and give an accurate statement with respect to the evidence, right?
The evidence that I take?
Yes, ma'am.
Correct.
So it's really not the narrative, because anyone can lie to you. It's the medical evidence that's the most important. Isn't that right, nurse?
No, it is not. For legal reasons, perhaps, but for the care of my survivor, the narrative is extremely important and is more important to me than the evidence that I take.
And no one's ever lied to you.
I can't say that. I don't know. It's not my job to ask, are you telling the truth? I write what that survivor tells me.
Understood. Pass the witness.
State.
Thank you, Your Honor. So Mr. Cantrell spent some time talking about force within the narrative portion of your report. So I want to talk about that for a second. Does force always have to be physical?
It is not.
When he's asking you about force, what are you interpreting that to mean?
The way he asked me, my understanding is he wanted me to say if forced was there in the narrative. The word was not there. She goes on to talk about verbal threat.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. So did she demonstrate to you or tell you that there
Objection,
was?
Your Honor. That would be hearsay.
It's,
It's within the
it's
report.
it,
Judge.
and could I see states exhibit number 7, please? And can I have both attorneys approach?
So other than threats, were there any other, within her history, did she give you any other, and let me give you a copy back of State Exhibit number 7. Did she tell you anything in her history that indicated the force was used?
He asked me to do things. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. Eventually, I did give him oral sex. He finished in my mouth.
I'm also looking in your narrative under section 2, where it says, he said, if I needed to go home, I needed to do something for him or for his friends. Would you consider that force?
Yes.
So Mr. Cantrell also spent some time talking about trauma And as it relates to specific things within our body, does trauma always leave a visible mark or injury?
It does not.
So given her history and her narrative history and your physical examination and the evidence that you've collected, was all of that consistent with her history, her narrative history?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Cantrell asked you the question about, isn't no DNA very strong evidence that my client did not commit this crime? You remember that question?
I do.
And you said no, but he didn't let you explain. Why is that not very strong evidence?
We often do not find DNA for many reasons, ones we've talked about. Just with time, it goes away. With touching doorknobs, with everything that touches that body, then you lose some of that DNA. So most of the time, we do not find DNA.
Have you ever dealt with cases where an assailant or suspect has confessed where on your examination you did not find DNA? To your knowledge?
I can't answer that one because we don't get any follow-up. We don't know what happens with the suspect. So I can't answer that question.
But again, no DNA in this case is consistent with your over 1,300 examinations with the history that she provided.
Yes, it is.
So I want to go kind of point by the sexual touching so that we're on the same page about what she told you happened. As far as sexual contact, we talked about penile oral penetration, right?
Yes,
So she did say that happened.
yes,
You also talked about on direct examination that there was some sexual touching, but it was over the clothes.
yes.
Where did she say that he touched her body?
Object, hearsay.
That'll be
medically
overruled.
relevant. Not medically relevant.
All right, that'll be overruled.
You can answer that question.
It's taken time because of sorting out the players.
May I approach him?
Yes.
The court?
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you a short break till 2:45. Will that give you guys enough time? Or maybe a little bit more? Should I say 2:50? All right, okay, you gotta say, because sometimes I see the break sign and sometimes I don't. So we're gonna come back in at 2:50. Remember what I said, you've heard some testimony, you're not allowed to discuss it amongst yourself or with anyone else. Just make sure your badges are visible and no investigation. Everything you need you'll get from inside the courtroom. Everyone, please rise.
State, you want to speak to your witness? Did defense want to come up with the state to speak to your
Sure.
witness?
Don't talk about anybody else except, okay? I don't, we're trying to allude to anybody else.
Okay,
It's already in evidence, but you're.
makes sense. That's why it was taking me a while to sort through, because I was trying to figure out which.
All right, so
think there's never a judge. I mean, at this point, like, we're doing these backdoor later, after it's already been admitted, redactions, it's already been admitted.
To follow the spirit of the judge's ruling earlier. Trying to follow the spirit of the judge's ruling earlier on the motion. Consistent.
So you want to wait a second, Judge? One minute so we can talk to you about this? If you don't mind.
Is it? Oh, I just. Yes. Oh, the jury's.
Yes.
So this medical report. So the state produced it, but hasn't been published. There's some information for that relate to other people.
All right, is that as an exhibit number 7?
Exhibit number
Because 7 is their exam. So you're just questioning this witness about what's in state's exhibit number 7?
Yes, was admitted without objection.
All right, so state's exhibit number 7 is in evidence.
It's in evidence, but it hasn't been published yet. And so what we would like to do, so the jury's not used, is to redact that portion that thanks to.
There were no objections to state's exhibit number 7, and the witness has been testifying to everything from 7.
That is true. Like I said, it still hadn't been published, but also you gave a ruling that no mention of other people would be allowed in. So they actually violated.
Well, no, they offered state's exhibit number 7 into evidence, and the defense said that they had no objections to 7. It wasn't a violation of my rule. Each witness was informed, or the state was to inform their witnesses what not to speak of. But
So we're just
States-
asking that portion that deals with people. being redacted.
where's the state's exhibit number
And
7,
all the
please?
Stuff about my client doing sexual act, all of it, we want all that.
State, are you planning on publishing this to the jury with this witness now, or no?
But you're not planning on publishing the jury.
All right, so we'll take the matter of the contents of state's exhibit number 7 that was admitted without objection outside the presence of the jury. The state has said that they're not going to be publishing it at this point in time and not asking this witness about what other alleged co-actors did. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, let's bring the jury in.
Your Honor, this witness advised not to refer to other cases.
Yes.
All rise for the jury.
All right, everyone, please be seated. All right, state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Whitty, where we left off was we were talking about what this defendant has been alleged to do as far as sexual contact. We previously left off about touching, you had mentioned during your history, narrative history, that Sarah had said that she was touched over the clothing. Can you tell this jury where she stated that she was touched over her clothing by this defendant?
He touched me right here. Parentheses, pointing to genital area, into parentheses, and on my butt on the outside of my clothes. I tried to push him off, but he kept doing it.
Okay, so in that case, we have her saying that he touched her being Sarah, on her genitals.
On the outside of her clothing.
Yes. Also, you noted during your swabs, some other taking, the reason that you took certain pieces or certain swabs. As far as this defendant is concerned, where is there any allegation of touching of her breasts by this defendant?
Yes,
Okay. And specifically, do you recall what she said about that?
he kissed my breast.
To you, does that indicate oral breast touching?
Yes,
So is it fair to say in summation, we have, as far as sexual contact is concerned, penile oral penetration, touching over the clothes of the victim's genitals, and oral breast touching.
yes.
I'll pass the witness.
Right, defense.
But ma'am, you didn't find any scientific evidence of that, did you?
Of what, sir?
Of some type of, any kind of scientific evidence to show that my client either touched her breast, kissed her on the lips, found semen in her mouth, or any other part of her body. There's no evidence of that whatsoever, is there?
No physical evidence.
And obviously you weren't there. But
Correct.
when someone ejaculates in someone's mouth, they either spit it out or swallow it, right? I'm not saying you're an expert in that field.
Is it okay to crawl under the table? Or it absorbs.
Okay, but
Yeah.
as a general rule, somebody will either spit it out, I would think, or swallow it, right?
Yes,
So if someone spits it out, there's a good chance you would get semen like either on the body or on the clothes, or just somewhere on that person or the other person, right?
it all
Just
depends on
generally.
where it goes.
Sure, but that's a good chance, correct?
It all depends on where it goes. There's no common,
Understood. But the fact of the matter is, my client's DNA, according to the report you read, and with the testing that you did that day, when Sarah came there on the 30th of March, you did not find any scientific evidence that would lead him to being the perpetrator of doing that act. Isn't that right?
I did not find any dried secretions.
You didn't find any DNA otherwise, right? I mean, none.
I don't see DNA, but I
Understood.
did not find any dried secretions.
Which would, you're hoping to be in those dried secretions DNA, right?
Correct.
So that was absolutely no evidence of his dried secretions on her body, her clothing, her neck, her mouth, her abdomen, her pelvis, anywhere. Isn't that right?
The lab found no biological evidence.
And that's consistent. You didn't either.
I did not see any evidence.
Thank you very much. Pass the witness.
One brief follow-up. Mr. Cantrell spent a lot of time talking about forensic evidence or physical evidence. And he asked you whether the lack of physical evidence there's no physical evidence to show that he did it, right?
Correct.
Again, there's no physical evidence to prove that he didn't do it either.
Correct.
And the lack of physical evidence in this case, was that consistent or inconsistent with the narrative histories?
Consistent.
I'll pass the witness.
No other questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, is this witness excused or subject to recall?
As far as we're concerned, she's excused.
We'd ask that he should be excused.
All right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you can't discuss your testimony with anyone other than attorneys for the state or the defense. Do you understand?
I do.
All right, thank you. You may step down. And if you'll leave that exhibit with the court reporter, please. All right, state, call your next witness.
State calls Viorica Fundriano.
All right, could you raise your right hand for me? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, you can lower your hand, and I'm gonna need you, you can slide the chair up. And please keep your voice raised so that the court reporter and so that the jurors can hear. All right, and could you state your name for the record? State your name for the record.
My name is Viorica Funduriano.
All right, state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Fundriano, you know Sarah Fundriano?
She's my daughter,
Okay. Where are you from?
Romania.
So were you born in Romania?
Yes,
You're here in the United States. So when did you move to the United States?
when?
Yes.
1996.
And when you moved to the United States, did you move to San Antonio?
No, first we lived in Sacramento for about 10 years and then we moved here.
Okay. Do you remember when you moved to San Antonio?
Yes, in 2004,
What year was Sarah born?
2003,
So how old approximately was she when she moved to San Antonio?
1 year.
So all of her school age has Sarah lived here in San Antonio?
Yes,
I want to direct your attention to March 29th of 2020. Do you remember that day?
yes,
And I kind of want to start from the reason that we're here really is that did you see Sarah that day?
yes,
And when did you see her?
during the day,
Okay. And was she at home all day?
yes,
Did she eventually leave the home?
yes.
Do you know about what time she left the home?
Evening, like after 5,
Okay. And when she left the house, did you know that she was leaving the house?
no,
Did you see her leave the house?
yes,
So were you surprised that she was gone later in the day?
a little bit, yes,
At that point, were you aware of her phone situation?
yes.
What, did she have a working phone at that point?
She had a phone that had no service, so she had to have Wi-Fi in
Ah.
order to be able to use it.
And so on March 29th of 2020, you were aware of that.
Yes,
When she left, that day, did she tell you where she was going?
No.
And after she left, did you ever try contacting her?
Yes, once or twice, but then I was waiting for her because I knew she could not answer the phone or she could not use it unless she is in a place where she can use it.
Why were you contacting her?
I just wanted to know where she is.
Eventually, do you get a hold of Sarah?
No, she called me. So she called me first time when I was talking with her was about 11 o'clock in the night.
When you talked to her, did she call you from her phone?
No,
Whose phone did she call you from?
she told me that somebody gave the phone to her because her phone, I don't know what happened with her phone, but she said, "Mom, please don't hang up. It's me." And she was crying.
Okay.
And
Without, we're not going to go into really what she said. When she left earlier in that day, was there anything about her mood or demeanor, her attitude that was out of the ordinary?
no,
When she called you about 11 o'clock that night, how would you describe her attitude or demeanor?
she was so scared and she cried. Actually, it was a FaceTime. I was surprised she was calling me on FaceTime. And then I realized that she really needed to talk with me straight face to face. And I saw her crying. She was devastated and she was so scared. And she said, Mom, I want to come home.
Okay. Based on how you saw her, were you concerned that something might have happened?
Yes, right away.
And when she called you from that person's phone, were you necessarily expecting a call from her?
Yes, I was thinking that if it's late and she might call, so this is why I didn't go to sleep. I was thinking, okay, I hope she will call and let me know what's happening or where she is and when she's coming home, because I was a little bit nervous. She didn't say anything when she left.
Okay. And without telling me specifically, I don't want to hear what she necessarily said, but did she tell you what happened?
No,
Eventually, does she come back home?
yes,
Do you know how she got home?
a friend,
And do you know what friend brought her home?
Brandon,
And do you know Brandon?
yes.
And how did you know him?
He's friend with Sarah, and he doesn't live far from our home. So I know how he looks. I know I had few talks with him, and I know him.
Okay. When she arrived home, did you talk to her?
Yes, right away. I was waiting for her.
Had her attitude or demeanor changed?
She was sobbing and shaking. I gave her a hug and I assured her that I love her, and I tried to find out what happened, but she didn't want to talk.
And are you aware of where police eventually called?
Yes.
And do you know who called police?
Her sister.
Okay. So after police came, did they come to the house?
Yes, the police came.
Okay. And did Sarah talk to the police officer?
Yes.
By that point, had her attitude or demeanor changed?
She was still scared. But she was trying to make me understand that she cannot talk to me. So I was staying away and let them talk.
So prior to her calling you at about 11 p.m. from that stranger's phone, were you aware of anything that happened in between the time she left the house and then she called you?
No, no,
So had anybody else called you to tell you what had happened?
no.
Do you remember if Sarah went for a type of a medical exam?
Yes, she went.
Do you-
As I remember, I think next day. Yeah, right, next day.
And do you know who took her?
Her sister.
Eventually, after this, did you speak to a detective involved in the case?
Excuse me.
Did you speak after she had
Yes,
gone to the
yes.
hospital? How did that detective contact you?
So right away after he talked to her, he talked to me. I was waiting outside of the house
Okay.
because they were in the family room and I didn't want her to be disturbed by me listening to what she was saying. So I was stepping outside and another officer was there on the porch and I was talking with him a little bit. And then the one that was inside came outside and we talked.
Did a detective ever call you on the phone?
Yes.
And do you know when that happened?
After a while, I realized, and he told me, I think he told me right then, after he came outside, that he was abused or somehow.
Objection here, Sam.
Sustained.
Okay. So prior to Sarah leaving the house that day, did you see her getting ready or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Did it seem like anything special that she was leaving for?
No. No.
After the police came, but before she went to the hospital for a medical exam, did Sarah stay in the house that night?
Yes.
I'll pass the witness.
Defense.
Ms. Wondriani, thank you for being here today. I needed to ask you a couple of questions. One of the things that you said in answer to Mr. Villarreal's questions is that a few days after the incident, that you talked on the phone with the detective. Is that right? Do you remember talking on the phone with the detective?
Yes.
Okay. And I think that they talked to your daughter first and then she handed the phone to you because she had to do a school project. Does that sound right?
I don't remember.
Okay. But you remember at some point, a few days later, 4 or 5 days later, you talked to a detective. Does that sound right?
I remember I talked on the phone, but I don't know exactly when and how many days after.
Do you recall if that was San Antonio Police Department Detective Benavidez? Do you remember his name?
I remember his name.
Was it Benavidez?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Do you recall telling Detective Benavidez that Sarah left your house at about 8 p.m. that night? Do you recall telling him that when he called you on the phone?
No.
You don't recall telling him what time she left?
No.
Okay. Do you recall telling them that before she left, that she changed and put on makeup? Do you recall telling the detective that?
No.
You
She
don't
was
recall telling the detective that?
no.
Okay. Do you recall her telling you that she was going out skateboarding with her friends?
No, she didn't say what she's going to do or where she's going to.
So you don't remember what she
No.
told you she was going to do?
No.
Sarah has had a history of lying to you, hasn't she?
Judge, I'm
No.
gonna object. Can we approach?
Yes.
Withdrawn.
I believe this was subject to our motion in limine.
And, all right, and the defense has withdrawn the question. Do
I'll
you?
withdraw. I'll go a different direction. Your Honor.
Thank you.
Do you know whether Sarah enjoyed skateboarding in your neighborhood?
She did few times, but then she stopped because she had a very bad falling and she stopped.
But for a while, she enjoyed skateboarding in your neighborhood, right?
Usually right close to our house.
Do you recall if she had been skateboarding earlier that day
No.
before she went out again? You
no,
don't
she
recall?
didn't. Mm-mm.
Would it be strange to you if she said she wanted to go out skateboarding? Would that have surprised you around that time if she said she wanted to go skateboarding?
I don't know.
Okay.
I can't say anything about that.
About 2 years ago, do you know what kind of music she liked? Was she always listening to music?
Like all kinds of music, like teenager they listen to.
You don't remember one specific kind?
No. Mm-mm.
No further questions, Your Honor.
State,
I have no further questions, Judge.
is this witness excused or subject for recall?
We ask that she be excused.
She's excused, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. The rule has been invoked. What that means is you can't discuss your testimony with anyone. The only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state and or the defense. Do you understand?
Can you say it louder, please?
All right,
I'm sorry.
that's okay. The rule has been invoked. What that means is you cannot discuss your testimony with anyone. The only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state and attorneys for the defense. Do you understand?
Yes,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
All right, state, call your next witness.
The state calls Rebecca Garcia.
Yeah. That's the equipment in the 187. It responds at its own. All right, please have a seat, please. Can you raise your right hand for me? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
All right, just make sure you speak up so attorneys, so that the jurors can hear you and so that the court reporter can hear you, okay? If you could state your name for the record.
My name is Rebecca Garcia.
State.
Good afternoon, Rebecca. Thank you for being here. Can you tell us how you're related to Sarah?
I'm her older sister,
Okay, and what's your age difference?
12 years,
Okay, so you're really her older
Yeah.
sister.
31 next week. So
And so you've known her whole life?
yes, I've known her my whole life.
Okay. And have you always lived in the same home as her?
Yes, up until I got married at 20 and I moved out then.
How would you describe your relationship with your sister?
My relationship is really good. The good thing is that even when I moved out, I was always still in San Antonio. So I always stayed really close with my sister. You know, the age difference is really big. So always was a challenge to connect with her depending on, like, you know, the time of life she's in. But we have a pretty good relationship.
Keep in touch.
I mean, probably every single week. I see her at least once or twice.
And do you currently live in San Antonio?
I do.
And what do you do?
I'm a dentist.
Okay. And when this happened, this offense back in March of 2020, you were out of the home that your sister lived in?
Yes.
Okay. So she was living with your mom?
Yes, she's living with my parents.
Okay. Do you remember getting a call from Sarah on that date?
Yes, I do. I do.
Okay. And when you got that call, were you expecting it?
No, not at all. No, it was late at night. Didn't recognize the number. So I'm surprised I even picked up, honestly.
Okay. And without telling us what Sarah said, can you describe what her voice sounded like on the call?
Sure. It was just really shaky. She was sobbing. She just sounded really scared. You know, I've heard my sister cry before, but not like that.
Okay. So this was, have you heard her cry like that since?
I've heard her cry, like, you know, in relation to that situation, but it's very few and far between. It's just like those moments in the last couple of years where she has opened up to me a little bit about it, but I think it's really hard for her to talk about.
Okay. What did you do after you got that phone call from your sister?
Well, after she went over some of what happened, I just, you know, suggested that we call the police, and I asked her if she wanted to call or if she wanted me to call for her, and she suggested I call.
And where were you when you received that call?
I was in my house.
Okay. And did you stay there?
I did.
Okay. And so
It was during the pandemic, so I feel like that was like a time where it was like everything was masked up. Yeah.
okay.
I don't remember going there.
Okay. So you asked her if she wanted to call 911.
Yes. Well, I suggested she call, and then she was kind of scared to call, so I called for her. But
Okay.
yeah.
And did you make that call from your home?
Yeah, for my cell phone.
Okay. And was Sarah on that call?
No.
Okay.
No. Just
It
me.
was just a phone call that you made to law
Yes, ma'am.
enforcement. Okay. Did you direct law enforcement to any particular address?
I gave him my parents' address.
Okay. And do you know if they went there?
They did.
Okay. And you didn't go to the home?
No. Not that night.
When did you go to the home?
In the morning to pick her up for the testing at the hospital.
Okay. Can you describe her demeanor when you saw her that morning?
She was completely like not there, very withdrawn, very flat. You know, I told her like she doesn't need to say anything. Obviously, she was traumatized, but I said if you need to discuss anything, like I'm happy to listen. So it was a pretty quiet ride to the hospital.
Okay. And is that normal for her?
No.
When you got to the hospital, what did you do?
Well, we went in, I don't know the name of the hospital. It's the one off Floyd Curl in the medical center, I think Methodist. We went in and we told them why we were there because the cops had given my parents the direction. I had the paper, and they said I couldn't go back with her because of the pandemic. So I just went back to my car while they took her back.
Okay. And then did you drive her home after the exam?
That's what I remember.
Okay. Do you remember what type of phone Sarah was using around that time period?
I think it was just an iPhone with no service at the time. Yeah. It like she would honestly like the years get by me, but I think it was, you know, she'd call me when she had Wi-Fi, but like not, you know, from a phone number.
Okay. And did she usually only have a phone that was Wi-Fi use only?
I mean, there was a time where she had her phone connected. I don't know at that time whether it had been disconnected by my parents or if, if it had just not been a time where she had her cell phone yet, because she was 16 at the time. So I don't remember.
Okay, that's okay. Did you ever give any statements to a detective?
I called the number back, or the number my mom gave me to call for the detective. And then when I, had given him the call, he said, well, at this point, the case already made it to the DA and we don't need a statement from you.
Okay. But you did follow up with him in case you needed to.
Yes.
And pass witness.
Defense.
No questions.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
Excused by the state, Your Honor.
Excused by defense.
All right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you can't discuss your testimony with anyone. Only persons you're allowed to speak to are attorneys for the state or the defense. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. You're excused.
Thank you.
State, call your next witness.
State Calls Detective Ivan Benavides. Judge, you see, I think he might be in the hallway.
Sure.
Just come up on here, she's not- We got to finish up in the step.
All right, thank you.
Which is something we need to approach on, but I'll approach when I get there.
All right, can you raise your right hand for me? Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, have a seat, and if you could make sure you keep your voice up so that the court reporter and the jurors can hear.
All right.
If you could state your name for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Ivan Benavides.
All right, state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Benavides, how are you employed?
I'm with the San Antonio Police Department. I'm a detective.
So prior to becoming a detective with SAPD, were you a patrol officer with SAPD?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I was.
And how do you become a San Antonio Police Department officer?
Basically have to go through several steps. Some of them are background checks, testing. You have to take a test. Also, oral board, and of course, the police academy.
What is the police academy, generally speaking?
It includes, of course, physical training, classes on Texas law, federal law, traffic laws, CCP, Code of Criminal Procedures, on officer safety. So,
Okay.
Mhm.
When did you join SAP?
that was on March of 2001.
And prior to 2001, did you have any other law enforcement experience?
I worked about a year and a half at the magistrate's office and detention center.
What steps does it take to move from or promote from an officer to a detective?
So you have to go, you have to take a test, an exam, a written exam. And of course, the top so many, depending on the slots that are available, they choose so many from that list.
Okay.
Yes,
When
sir.
did you promote to detective?
That was in September of 2018.
And when you promoted to detective, did you get an assignment into a certain section or division?
Yes, sir. I was assigned to the Special Victims Unit.
And so that was again in 2018.
2018, yes, sir.
And how long did you stay in the Special Victims Unit?
Approximately 2.5 years.
So on March 29th of 2020, were you assigned to the Special Victims Unit?
Yes, I was, sir.
Currently, as of today, what is your rank?
I'm a detective.
And are you still with SVU?
No, I am not.
Where are you currently assigned?
I'm currently assigned to the West Property Crimes Unit.
And when did you move to property crimes?
I believe that was in February of 2021.
So what is, and I want to relate this in particular to a SVU or Special Victims Unit detective. What is your role and function within the unit?
Basically, you get cases assigned, and you are to investigate those cases. And what I mean by investigating cases, conduct interviews, submit evidence to the lab. And when I'm talking interviews, I'm talking complainants, victims, suspects, witnesses.
On March 29th of 2020 or around there, were you assigned a case involving a defendant by the name of ALEXIS Morganfield
Yes, sir.
with a complainant of Sarah Fundrianu?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember, were you able to determine Sarah's date of birth?
I'm sorry, sir.
Were you able to determine Sarah's Fundrianu's date of birth?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember that date of birth?
I don't remember the exact date of birth.
Would having a copy of your report help refresh your memory? As to
Yes,
that?
sir.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Detective Benavides, I'm going to show you what I am marking as State's Exhibit number 8 for identification purposes.
All right, sir.
Do you recognize that document?
I do, sir.
And what do you recognize it to be?
That is the charge and disposition report along with the prosecution guide.
Okay, if you could just thumb through it real quick
Sure.
and just make sure that it hasn't been changed, altered in any way.
No, sir. The only thing that I can tell is there's a small underlying, there's a small marking under a nickname here of the
Okay.
defendants. That's about it.
Okay, other than that, besides that one underline, is it essentially the same report that you submitted to the DA's office?
That is correct, sir.
So if you need to refresh your memory from the report, please do so. Just please don't read directly from it out loud, okay?
Yes, sir.
So if you can look at the report and tell me what was Sarah Fundariana's date of birth.
Her date of birth is July 28th, 2003.
And we'll talk about it more extensively in a minute, but were you able to identify the defendant, Alexis Morganfield?
Yes, sir.
And were you able to determine a date of birth for him?
Yes, sir.
What is his date of birth?
His date of birth is May 21st, 2000.
So is it fair to say that he's about 3 years and 2 months older than Sarah Fundariana?
Yes, sir.
So how does a case get assigned to you?
So after the responding officer makes the scene and generates the report, it is forwarded over to the special victims unit. One of the supervisors will review the report and he will assign it to whichever investigator is available.
And so in this case, and I should back it up for a second. When you get assigned a case, and I'm thinking in very general terms, what do you get when you get assigned a case? Like what information is provided to you?
Most of the time you just get the report, a copy of the report.
And is that the offense report from the initial responding officer?
Correct. Yes.
And so what is your responsibility at that point after you get that report?
Of course, review the report, make sure that you have contact information for victims, witnesses, suspects, and see if there's any evidence available in the property room.
So on this case, do you remember or do you recall if that was basically what your starting point was just the report?
Yes, sir.
Based on the report, what did you do next?
I started off by attempting to contact the victim and her mother.
Eventually, were you able to speak with both of them?
Yes, sir.
And how did you speak with them?
Via telephone call.
Now, this is March of 2020.
Yes, sir.
Was that something typical of how you would conduct interviews?
No, sir.
Why not?
Because of the COVID had just, I guess, had just started. So there were a lot of things we weren't sure about. So that was the best, I guess, at that time was just to do everything over the phone.
So although it was not the normal typical practice of SVU, this is how the police department responded and for safety reasons.
Correct, sir.
So eventually you speak to Sarah and Villarica, I believe is her name, Fundariana.
Yes, sir.
When you talk to Sarah, without telling me specifically what she said, was her statement to you consistent with the report and the statement that she gave to the responding officer that night?
Yes, sir.
So after you talked to her, as it relates to Alexis Morganfield, did you have any identifying information?
The information that I recall having is social media information.
Okay. So who provided that information to you?
The victim.
And do you recall if there was like a specific name or username that she provided to you?
Yes, sir.
And did you use that information to further identify the defendant?
Yes, sir.
What social media platforms did you look at?
Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.
So using those, were you able to identify accounts that related to Alexis Morganfield?
Yes, sir.
And you know what I mean?
Yes.
going to show you what's already been admitted. There's exhibits 1, 2, 3, and 4. Is that the Instagram profile of Alexis Morganfield?
Yes, sir.
And is there a particular name that's associated with it?
Lil Kawali.
Okay, and just for the jury so that they can have, how is it spelled?
It's LILKWOLLY_.
Using that name, were you able to identify other social media platforms?
Yes, sir. Okay.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as states exhibit number 9 and 10 for identification purposes. Do you recognize those?
Yes, sir, I do.
And did you capture these images? Or take them from the internet?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what in these photos directly relates to the identification of Alexis Morganfield?
Of course, the username and the photo itself.
And so what platform do states exhibits numbers 9 and 10 relate to?
This one is Twitter, and both of them are Twitter. Yes, sir.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as states exhibits numbers 11 and 12.
Okay.
And looking at those, what social media platform do those relate to?
YouTube.
And again, do we see that same name of Lil K. Wally?
Yes, sir.
And during this process of going through all these social media accounts, did you become familiar with how Alexis Morganfield looked?
Yes, sir.
And are the photos contained in states exhibits numbers 11 and 12, 9 and 10 consistent with the images of Alexis Morganfield and what's already been admitted in states exhibits 1, 2, 3, and 4?
Yes, sir.
So is it fair to say states exhibits 1 through 4 and 9 through 12 all relate to the same Alexis Morganfield?
That's correct, sir.
And again, states exhibits numbers 9, 10, 11, and 12. Were these images that you yourself went on the internet and took screenshots of?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And did you use states exhibits numbers 9, 10, 11, and 12 to identify in part Alexis Morganfield?
Yes, sir.
Now, at this time, the state would move to admit states exhibits numbers 9, 10, 11, 12. Entering to defense for objections of any as previously provided in electronic discovery.
Your Honor, with regard to States Exhibit 10, 11, and 12, we have no objection. We believe that States Exhibit 9 is not my client's, and we're prepared to make an argument report to that effect, but we do not object to 10, 11, and 12.
All right, States Exhibit number 10, 11, and 12 are admitted without objection. If I could see States Exhibit number 9, please.
Would you like to see all of them, Judge?
Just number 9. And I'm so sorry, State. Yes, let me see 10, 11, and 12. Thank you.
Your Honor, defense posits that States
Just a
Exhibit.
moment.
Thank you.
All right, can I see both parties? Four, remember, you're not allowed to discuss with yourselves or with anyone else. You're not allowed to do any investigation. Anything that you need to know concerning this case, you'll know from inside the courtroom. Does everyone understand? All right, everyone, please rise. You can be seated. All right, defense, you want to take the witness on board here as it relates to exhibit number 9?
Detective,
Yes, sir.
get your attention towards State's Exhibit 9.
Yes, sir.
And I believe you stated after you had conversations with Sarah, you started on your own to look up a little koala.
That's correct, sir.
And one of the profiles you stated was this one, State's Exhibit number 9.
That is correct. The photo right there in the circle.
So are you testifying is that there's just a picture of him on there? You're not saying he created this profile?
May I take a look at it one more time, sir? Thank you. That's correct. That's a photo of him.
So what you're saying though then is that the rest of this that's on this photograph, you don't know who created it whatsoever. You can't tell the judge or this jury that Lil Kawali created this profile, correct?
That is correct, sir.
So based on that, Your Honor, we'd ask that State's Exhibit 9 be excluded.
All right, state, any questions?
Yes, I do. Detective Davis, I'm gonna show you State's Exhibit number 9, number 10.
Yes, sir.
Has been admitted to without objection,
Yes, sir.
and number 9 is the one that's in question. Can you tell me if that picture in State's Exhibit number 9 is just a smaller picture of what's already in State's Exhibit number 10?
That is correct, sir.
State's Exhibit number 10, was this photo that you got a picture that is sourced from the same Twitter account that's in State's Exhibit number 9?
Yes, sir. It was enlarged. Yes, sir.
And I understand that you cannot tell me who created this account, correct?
That is correct.
And as a matter, you did not use necessarily who created this account in order for the identification.
That is correct.
So as you relied on State's Exhibits numbers 9, 10, 11, and 12, were all of those pictures used to gather information that is connected to one another to identify Alexis Morganfield?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
I'll pass the witness.
So basically, Detective, you're saying that I looked up Lil Kawali and you found these items on the internet.
Yes, sir.
You have no clue as to who put those on the internet.
No, sir.
And all you're, I guess, going to be able to testify is that I don't know who created this this page, but I found pictures of my client on those pages.
I found, yes, sir. I found pictures with same username. The username matching those photos.
Understood. And since you can't testify as to who put those there or who created that, is that a sample of? Have you ever heard of the word bots, fake accounts and things like that?
Not that particular word, but there are fake accounts all over social media. Yes, sir.
So you can't tell this jury that that is something accurate that my client created, because if you looked at this defendant's exhibit number 9, do you still have it in front of you?
Yes, sir.
And it says 0 followers, right? 0 following, I guess.
0 following.
That would lead you to believe that someone's never seen that or has ever responded to that account, right?
No, sir. That has never been seen or responded.
When someone's following an account, they have followers, right? They
Yes, sir.
respond to an account. Are you with me? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, but I'm not necessarily. If you follow someone, you don't have to respond. You can just follow someone.
Understood. So as a general rule, though, either that account is a brand new account or no one's ever followed it. Would that be fair? And
Can you
click
rephrase
the
that?
box.
Okay.
And click the box, I'm following that account. In other words, you got to click, I'll follow somebody, right? Like if you want to follow Elon Musk or the judge here in this court, if you want to follow her tweets or whatever, you can say I'm following it.
That's
Right.
correct. Yes, sir.
All right. So on that one, it's no followers, right?
0 followers.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 0 following.
Following, yes. So it's on the internet. It has no followers or following. You can't tell this jury that my client created that and posted those pictures, right?
That is correct.
A lot of other different people could have done that.
It's possible. Yes, sir.
And you've heard of that all the time. And that happens. People create fake accounts of other people, either for scamming purposes or whatever other purposes that you can just imagine, right?
Yes, it does happen. Yes, sir.
Okay. So you can't testify to the jury that Alex would be responsible for whatever's on those accounts or otherwise if he didn't create that.
Okay, one more time. What was that? Can you repeat the question, please?
Testify to the jury that Alex here would be responsible for the content of those different accounts if he did not create that.
No, I will not be able to testify to that. No, sir.
Pass the witness.
As it relates to State's Exhibit number 9, if you go look at the bottom where it has a post, November 28th, 2017, out now, SoundCloud, I'm only 13. Do you see a name that you associated later with this case to help identify Alexis Morganfield?
Yes, sir.
What name is that?
Jada King.
And since we're outside the presence of the jury, were you able to identify through your investigation who this Jada King is?
Yes, sir.
And who is that?
I'll look through my report real quick. That would be Jalen Cornell Green.
And were you able to find other ways that they were associated?
Yes, sir.
And in what ways?
Found a case number SAPD 1923-3542 in which the defendant and Mr. Green were both associated with.
They were both listed on that report.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And they were listed to be associated within that report.
Yes, sir.
And did you use that information in helping to identify Alexis Morganfield?
Yes, sir.
And that Jaden Green is also the same person that you come to find out is the person also associated with the username of JGAKING.
Yes, sir.
I'll pass the witness.
Your Honor, this is beyond the scope of the motion in limine. However, we're not gonna object to the fact that Jada King was the person Sarah went to go meet. We will not object to that because that's
State's Exhibit number 9, the defense's objection is sustained. Is there anything else?
no, Your Honor.
Judge,
All right.
just since we're outside the presence of the jury, so we don't have to excuse them again.
Yes.
We anticipate, and subject to the court's ruling, saying that eliciting through this witness that he used this information. Obviously, we're not going to say that they were suspects in a case, but he was able to identify that name, those usernames to these people in a different report. And I know that this is touching on the defense's motion in limine, and so I wanted to have this opportunity to get a ruling from the court as far as the admissibility of that information.
All right, but hasn't he already identified the defendant through these photos? Is there a need for walking towards the line of the motion in limine?
The concern I have, Judge, is that I would not have a problem with that if they're not going to argue it, right?
Mhm.
But if I can't anticipate what they're going to argue, and so I think, and
The court is,
this adds to the identification level. And so if they're going to stand up and say that we did not properly authenticate or properly identify Mr. Morganfield, then this information is completely relevant to that information.
Well, two things. Sarah already testified that Mr. Morganfield was the person that was in that car with her. Secondly, she already testified that she was going to go meet Jada King. So that's all in evidence already. So there's,
assuming the defense is not going to argue that she didn't testify to meeting Jada King.
no, quite contrary.
All right, state, you're not allowed to go into any acts that were alleged to have been committed by anyone other than Mr. Morganfield.
I understand that then, Judge, and so we're going to move and eliminate this point that they are prevented from arguing that we have not sufficiently identified him. And I ask that the court allow me, if that is argued, to reopen our case at that point.
We will concede now that he has been identified more than one time.
Okay, well,
All right. Let's bring the jury back in.
so just for the record, Judge, so I have to keep my notes clear. Not 10 through 12 were admitted, and you're going to sustain the objection on 9.
Yes,
Okay.
and 10, for the record, 10, 11, and 12 were admitted without objection.
It's right here.
No,
So what was that ruling, Judge? I didn't hear it.
10, 11, and 12 were admitted without objection. 9 was sustained. And state, is this your last witness or you? It's not, how many more do you have? Okay.
It'll be last one, hopefully.
Okay.
Fix the air conditioner.
No, you'll have to talk to the powers that be, whoever's in charge of the AC in the 187th and the broken equipment.
I have a really good AC guy.
All right, you just pass that information along. All right, we're ready.
All rise for the jury.
May need that person from my. Oh, everyone, just remember, you can sit in any chair you want to sit in. Of course, people who have claimed their chairs with pillows, they probably want to keep those. Oh, please be seated. All right, state.
So again, Detective Benavides, as it relates to state's exhibits numbers 9 through 12, you use that information in identifying Alexis Morganfield.
Yes, sir.
Did you see Mr. Morganfield in the courtroom today?
I do, sir.
And can you point at him and identify him by piece of clothing?
Gentleman sitting at the corner, black suit with a red tie.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that this witness has identified the defendant. After you identified Mr. Morganfield, were you able to identify some of the locations that the victim told you about in her statement?
Yes, sir.
And as it relates to a gas station that was mentioned, were you able to identify a location for that
Yes, sir.
gas station?
Yes, sir.
And what address did you come to find out that was?
7050 IH 35 North.
And is that located here in Bexar County, Texas?
Yes, sir.
Additionally, through a matter of course of your investigation and speaking with witnesses on this case, were you able to identify the apartment complex in which this in which this case is alleged to have been committed?
Yes, sir.
And what is that location?
3644 Ben Zingelman Road.
And is that also located here in Bear County, Texas?
Yes, it is.
So after you've identified Mr. Morganfield, and you've talked with you talked with the victim as well as her mother, did you contact any other witnesses as it relates to the gas station?
I did not, sir.
Okay. Was that information followed up on?
Yes, sir.
By who?
Detective Escareno.
And when, in talking with Detective Escareno and in the matter of your investigation, were you able to recover any surveillance videos?
No, sir.
Why not?
It had expired. The video had expired already.
So that information or that evidence was not available at the time that you tried to get it.
That's correct.
And did you, when you talked to the victim, did she provide any other names of witnesses, not suspects, or suspect in this case? Did she mention a Brandon?
That's correct. Yes, sir. Mhm.
And did you attempt to talk to Brandon?
Yes, I did.
Were you successful in talking to Brandon?
No, sir.
Did you attempt to talk to the victim's sister?
I attempted, but I was not able to talk to her.
So this is to say, the last step that you took in this case was attempting to contact the victim's sister.
Yes, sir.
And at that time, were the lab results available for the items that were sent to the lab?
Yes, sir. There were items submitted on 2 different times.
Okay. And is it fair to say that no biological evidence was found?
Yes, sir.
And then after talking to her, getting the Bear County Crime Lab information and analysis, at that point, did you submit the case to the Bear County District Attorney's Office?
Yes, sir, I did.
And for what offense?
It will be for sexual assault of a child.
Did, as it relates to the gas station, were you able to identify any witnesses at the gas station?
I was not, sir.
Did you attempt to, or did somebody attempt to?
Detective Escareno, yes, sir.
But he was unsuccessful.
Yes, sir.
I'll pass the witness.
Detective, thank you very much for coming here. I represent Mr. Morganfield. When you did your investigation, you also compared your notes with Officer Sandoval?
I'm not sure what you mean by compare my notes.
Well, he had made a report. I'm sorry. You had not done an investigation. I apologize for that. You were the second officer or detective to talk to Sarah, right?
Yes, sir.
And Officer Sandoval was, I guess, the first person to make contact with Sarah.
I believe so. Yes, sir. That's correct.
And did you look at his report?
I did, sir.
Did you look at his body cam or anything like that?
I did not look at his body cam, just his report, sir.
I'm going to go a little bit out of order, but with respect to Sarah, isn't it true that Sarah had told you that
Judge Crawford for hearsay.
Okay.
Sustained.
did you learn that, where did you learn that Sarah was heading to on March 29th of 2020?
I'm sorry.
Calls for hearsay.
That'll be sustained.
Okay. Was Sarah going to meet somebody that on March 29th, 2020? That is the basis of this investigation?
I'm sorry, sir. Are you talking about the interview that I had with her, the phone interview where she mentioned where she was headed?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
And most of the questions I'm going to ask you about that is going to be that about that interview because your report is not as thorough. Would you agree?
I'm not too sure what you mean as thorough. It
Well,
was a
it's not word
synopsis.
for word.
That is correct.
So when you talk to Sarah, Jada King, you recall that name?
I do, sir.
And she mentioned that to you, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
Was that who she was going to see?
Yes, sir.
And did she ever talk to you about being in alternative school?
Judge, I'm going to object to hearsay, and this is the state's motion in limine.
All right, the objection to hearsay will be sustained.
Did you ever learn how she knew the name Jada King?
It was through social media, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And did you learn whether or not she was going to meet up with Jada King on March 29th, 2020?
Judge calls for hearsay.
That'll be overruled.
You can answer.
Can you repeat the question, sir?
Yes. Did you ever learn that she was going to meet up with Jada King on March 29th, 2020 as the beginning of this investigation?
Yes, sir. I did.
Did you learn whether she knew things about Jada King, such as how he might treat women?
Judge, can we
That'll be
approach?
sustained.
May we approach?
No, that objection is sustained.
Well, I was going to tell you where I was going to go because I think it's relevant.
All right, that'll be sustained.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Did you look? Do you have any knowledge of why she was going to meet Jada King?
From what I recall, that we're going to hang out.
Did you know anything else?
As far as Jada King, it was to hang out, sir. That's what I do recall. That's from what I recall.
Did you ever learn that the purpose for her to go there was to smoke weed with him?
That was not from what I recall, that was not the purpose. She didn't come out and say that was the purpose.
Did you ever learn from your investigation that she actually did meet up with Jada King?
Yes, sir.
And what did you learn?
Judge, I'm going to object. This whole line of questioning is just hearsay about the victim's statement.
All right. Detective, if it's something that you've learned through your investigation, not from what someone told you, but through your investigation, you can answer the question. If it's based upon what something has told you, then the objection to hearsay will be sustained.
Okay. This is what she told me. These are things I learned them through her statement over the phone.
Okay, so without telling us what she told you, tell me what you learned from your investigation from that evidence.
I'm going to object to hearsay. He just responded. This is what the victim told him.
All right. Detective, if you've done some investigation based upon what was told to you, you can speak about what you learned from what was told to you, but you cannot testify to what someone said. Do you understand?
I understand, Judge. Okay. Can you repeat the question, sir?
Absolutely. In your own words, without repeating what someone said, but through your own investigation, did she ever sit down and talk to Jada King?
Okay.
That can be a yes or no.
Well, sir, I learned this from her statement, sir. All these things these questions that you're asking me, I learned these things through her statement over the phone, sir.
So the state's objection will be sustained.
So
I'm really trying to understand your questioning,
I
but
understand.
these things were told to me over the phone, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And I understand that most police officer reports contain what we call hearsay. You learn it from someone else, okay? And you write these things down.
Correct.
And so I'm not asking you what she told you, but if
Okay.
you, part of your investigation is also analyzing and writing down things that someone has told you, and that's how it comes into your report.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
If I ask you, what did she say, that would be hearsay.
Mhm.
If you're doing an investigation and you write in your own words what you believe happened in this case, then that is not hearsay.
No, excuse me. What is hearsay is what the court says it is.
I'm sorry.
So if you all have any questions, please ask the question. And if there are any objections, make your objections and I'll make my ruling.
So did you learn from your investigation that Sarah met with Jada King?
Yes, sir.
And did he at some point ask her to leave or stay? If
Yeah,
you recall.
I'm trying to recall.
Certainly
Yeah.
refresh your memory.
May I take a look at the report real quick? Let me see here. All right, sir. And I just want to make sure you're asking if Jada King asked the victim to leave?
To leave or to come on in, go into my apartment, or did she ask the victim to leave? Alleged victim.
Through my investigation, I learned that they met inside the one of the vehicles.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And at that point, did you learn that he had asked her to perform sex or oral sex with him?
Yes, sir.
And she refused to do that. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
And did she tell you that she knew that Jada King had was wearing a electronic monitor?
Judge, I'm going to object for hearsay.
That'll be sustained.
Did you ever learn that at this time, did you do an investigation and find out that Jada King was wearing an electronic monitor?
Yes, sir.
Did you know whether or not Sarah knew about that electronic monitor?
I don't recall if she knew about it or not, sir.
Okay. She could have, you just don't remember?
Now that I recall, yes, she was aware, from what I understand, through some messaging, I believe. Yes, sir.
Were you also aware through that messaging that Sarah knew the reputation of Jada King with respect to women who go visit him?
Judge, I'm going to object to hearsay and relevance.
All right, that'll be sustained.
In your investigation, did you learn that Sarah knew that Jada King, if women would not have sex with him, he would just like throw them out of the car or something to that effect? Did you learn that?
Judge,
Sustained.
When Sarah arrived to the apartment, isn't it true that she never asked Jada King to borrow a phone?
I'm going to object to hearsay, Judge.
Sustained.
From your own observations, wasn't there multiple times that Sarah had the opportunity to leave the situation that she was in? In other words, she could have left Jada King and she could have left when she was alone in a car. Isn't that true?
Judge, I'm going to object to foundation and personal knowledge. There's no evidence that he was present during any of this.
Sustained.
Did you not learn that through your investigation?
I'm sorry, you sustained the question, ma'am. Did you want me to
Yes.
answer?
Not this question.
Oh,
Through your own investigation, didn't you learn that there were multiple times that Sarah could have left the situation that she found herself in?
Judge, I'm going to object to hearsay and calls for speculation.
All right, that'll be sustained.
From your investigation, did you learn that Sarah claimed that my client never physically forced her to have perform oral sex on him? Did you learn that?
Judge, it calls for hearsay.
All right, that objection will be overruled.
okay. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that question one more time, sir, please?
Didn't she tell you that my client did not physically force her to perform oral sex on him?
Judge, that question clearly calls for hearsay.
That'll be overruled.
That is correct, sir.
And then once she performed oral sex on him, allegedly, my client left the car.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Isn't it true at some point after that, she had the opportunity to call Brandon to come pick her up? And Brandon was actually called, but could not find where she was called, where she was at. You recall that?
I do recall. Yes, sir.
That was the first time she called Brandon, right? Not the last time.
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Do you recall in your investigation, after Brandon was called, she was going to be, she wanted to wait there for Brandon. And so whoever she was talking about, talking to said that we're leaving or I'm leaving, but you're going to have to, wait. We're not waiting around for Brandon. Do you recall that?
Judge, I'm going to object to, again, hearsay.
Sustained.
Do you ever recall Sarah saying, well, I'm gonna walk to the gate and wait for Brandon? Do you ever recall that conversation?
Sustained.
Did you ever determine in your investigation who the driver of this Dodge Charger was?
Just 1 second, sir. I think it might be on here.
I'll answer it for you. It was Sarah who told you that, right?
That's correct. Yes, sir. From what I recall, yes, sir.
Did you ever run any kind of auto ownership, whether or not my client owned a Dodge Charger, gray Dodge Charger?
I did not, sir.
Did you ever learn or try to confirm whether or not Alex loaned Sarah a telephone so that she could call Brandon or text Brandon?
No, sir.
Isn't it true, officer, that you really had doubts with some of the statements that were made by Sarah to you?
I'm going to object to the relevance and invades the province of the jury.
Sustained.
When you found out that there was no DNA linking Mr. Morganfield, this person, to your investigation, that surprised you, didn't it?
It did not surprise me, sir. We have cases where there is evidence, and sometimes they're just not evidence, sir.
Okay.
Especially since she didn't go to the following day to get the same kit done.
Did you tell her to go that night?
She was advised from what I recall, by the responding officer.
So she was told it's a good idea to go there because you preserve things, right?
Yes, sir.
You said you did an investigation afterwards of little Wally.
Yes, sir.
And that purports to be my client, Mr. Morganfield here, right, Alex?
Yes, sir.
When you did that, was it a cursory search of the internet after the fact?
Yes, sir.
And are you familiar with bots and people who set up fake accounts using people's other internet or their internet names and things of that to do harm on other people?
Yes, sir.
They do it for either monetary purposes or they do it for trying to ruin a reputation.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
And is it also true, officer or detective, I'm sorry, in your line of work, you have either heard of or have investigated people who have maliciously trying to harm other people using the internet?
I'm going to object to relevance.
How's this relevant?
It's relevant because he's already testified that he's looked at some of these things.
All right, y'all want to approach?
Sure. I'm going to withdraw that question.
All right, sir.
So did you learn that Jada King, I'm sorry, that Sarah was introduced to Jada King by another individual?
Yes, sir.
And was that other individual related to Jada King?
Yes, sir.
You know how they were related?
I believe that was his brother.
And did you learn that that brother, without saying exactly what she learned word for word, but through your investigation, what kind of reputation Jada King had that Sarah had learned?
Judge, I'm going to object to relevance.
Sustained.
When Sarah went to meet Jada King on March 29th, 2020, do you think that she had a good idea of the reputation of Jada King?
Judge, I'm going to object.
Sustained.
When you spoke to Sarah's mother after your conversation with Sarah,
Yes, sir.
did you, where was Sarah heading that evening that the mother had informed you and you learned in your investigation?
Judge, I'm going to object, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
It's in your report. You should have.
The objection is sustained.
Did you learn that she put makeup on that night?
Again, Judge, I'm going to object to calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Have you ever heard of anyone putting makeup on before they go skateboarding ever?
No, sir. I don't believe I've ever investigated any cases involving someone to go skateboarding. So, no, sir.
Why do, if you know, women want to wear makeup before they meet up with somebody? If you know.
There are various reasons, I would say. Of course, for the most part, in my opinion, most women want to look attractive. Also, not just specifically for one person, but women just in general just want to look attractive regularly.
But we know that she was going to meet up with Jada King, right?
Yes, sir.
Because that's what she told her mother.
Correct, sir.
Not that she was going to meet Jada King, but she was put on makeup and she was going to go skateboarding. Correct?
Correct, sir.
You also talked to my client here, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you asked him about this investigation, correct?
Correct, sir.
Isn't it true that he said that he never sexually assaulted anyone?
Can I look through my notes real quick, sir?
And that would be on page 7 of 8 on Wednesday, June 17th, 2020.
You're correct, sir.
Pass the witness.
May we approach?
Yes.
Detective Benavides, Mr. Cantrell mentioned in his last questions to you whether you spoke to Alexis Morganfield. Do you remember that question?
Yes, sir.
Did you give offer to Mr. Morganfield the opportunity to give a full statement?
Yes, sir.
Did he take you up on that offer? Yes or no?
No, sir.
Mr. Cantrell asked you whether you were surprised that there was no DNA evidence in his case. You remember that question?
Yes, sir.
Were you surprised?
No, sir.
Why not?
The St. Kit was done the day after the date of the offense. Sir.
Did you have an opportunity to review the same report?
Yes, sir.
And the state nurse already testified, and she testified the fact that it was about 18 hours afterwards that she had her SANE exam after the sexual assault. Based on that time frame, would you expect to find DNA evidence?
Asked
No,
and
sir.
answered, Your Honor.
Overrule.
You can answer that question.
No, sir.
So when you got the crime lab results back that there was no DNA, that did not surprise you.
No, sir.
He asked you a lot of questions about basically the victim's statement. And even victim's mom's statement. In this case, after receiving, I should go back. when you have a case and you fully investigate it, do you have to send it over to the DA's office?
No, sir.
If you do not have evidence or do you not believe a crime is committed, do you submit those cases to the Bexar County DA's office?
No, sir.
And in this case, after completing your investigation, did you submit the case to the DA's office?
Yes, I did, sir.
So knowing all of those things that you've talked about on cross-examination, you still submitted this case to the DA's office.
Yes, sir.
Um, in this case, other than providing a statement, did the victim give you any other information?
She emailed me other information.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Did that include any videos?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
That'll be overruled.
Yes, sir.
Did you receive a video of Mr. Morganfield? That is a phone call between.
Objection, Your Honor.
I didn't hear anything. FaceTime call between Sarah and Alexis Morganfield.
Yes, sir.
And did you review that?
Yes, sir.
And did you consider that also? And when you sent this case to the DA's office?
Yes, sir.
I'll pass the witness.
Defense.
Detective, your job is not to decide who's guilty or not, right?
That's correct, sir.
That's up to the jury here, right?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
And you have no idea what the testimony of prior witnesses have said. Isn't that right?
No, sir. That is correct, sir.
Evidence in a case is just evidence in a case, right? It's for a fact finder to determine whether it's accurate, truthful, or not, along with the judge.
Correct. Yes, sir.
So when you make the comment that it was 18 hours later, yourself and Officer Sandoval urged her to go and get her, but actually you're at your time when you interviewed her, the sane exam had already occurred, right?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
But you were aware that Officer Sandoval encouraged her to go as soon as possible to get the sane exam.
Yes, sir.
It was her choice not to do that.
Correct, sir.
And actually you have no knowledge whatsoever as to how long DNA evidence might be reliably obtained, right? You're not an expert in that area.
No, sir.
So when you testified that you weren't surprised, it's basically what you know basically is that, you know, if you want to get good results, go to the doctor right away, right?
The sooner the better. Yes, sir.
And that's just common sense.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
I have no further questions.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
We'd ask that he be excused.
Excuse, Your Honor.
All right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you cannot discuss your testimony with anyone. You can only speak to attorneys for the state and defense. Do you understand?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, state, call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, state calls Veronica Barta.
All right, you take a seat here. Can you raise your right hand for me? Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you give will be the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, just have a seat. Please keep your voice up so that the court reporter and the jurors can hear. If you can state your name for the record, please.
My name is Veronica Barta.
All right, state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Barta, how are you employed?
I'm employed with Bear County Pretrial Services.
Okay. And what is Bear County Pretrial Services?
Bear County Pretrial Services is the entity that monitors or supervises defendants who are out on bond for the city of Bear County.
Okay. So you monitor people who have not been at that point convicted of anything.
Of their pending cases, correct?
So when you supervise somebody, is it fair to say you're just ensuring that whatever conditions of bond are, they're in compliance?
Correct. I'm just there to ensure that the conditions of bond are abided by. Yes, I'm not there to determine guilt or innocence or true or not true or anything like that.
So logically, is it fair to say that if somebody's under your supervision, they're not in custody?
Correct.
And your interactions with them, are they, actually, are you a law enforcement officer?
I'm not a law enforcement officer. I'm not a peace officer. No, sir.
And when you talk to somebody, are they free and willing to talk to you?
Yes, absolutely. In any way they please.
Okay. In this case, as it relates to the cause that we're here for today, at some point were you Alexis Morganfield's pretrial supervision officer?
I was from roughly October of 2021 to February of 2022.
And I should kind of go back. How long have you been with pretrial services?
Since March of 2021.
Your interactions with Alexis Morganfield, typically, were they in person, over the phone?
All of our interactions were over the phone or through email.
Okay. But nevertheless, you knew who Alexis Morganfield was.
Yes, sir.
And at some point he was on your caseload.
Yes, sir.
As it relates to this case and in this victim, did Mr. Morganfield make any incriminating statements to you?
There was a time just before he was taken off my caseload, I guess you could say, that he got really upset. He sent me a bunch of text messages just venting from everything, covering topics. I don't know why I'm on this GPS, stating that he didn't understand the terms. He stated he didn't understand why he didn't have any clout in the situation because he was the rapper. And then he also stated he didn't understand how this could be assault if the girl went down on him.
So he told you that, how can it be an assault if this girl went down on me?
Correct.
And when he made that statement, was he in custody?
No, he was not.
Did you ask him to make any statements about this case?
Absolutely not. We actually pushed defendants not to tell us anything about their case because we have nothing to do with it. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not an attorney. I'm not anything with the court in that sense. So we encourage them not to talk to us about their cases.
And was this statement given to you freely and voluntarily?
Absolutely freely and voluntary. Yes, sir.
And in any way, did you elicit this response from him?
No,
Or
absolutely
attempt
not.
to elicit this response?
No, it was not something I would forget, but I definitely did not elicit it. No, sir.
I'll pass the witness.
Like defense.
Officer Barta. In supervising people who are on bond, you come to learn a little bit of the details of what they're charged with. I mean, you can't do your job without finding out a little bit, at least, whether you want to or not, about what they're charged with. Isn't that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement, yes, sir.
Okay. And you were aware on the date of this alleged conversation, you were aware, at least in general terms, what Alex was accused of doing. I mean, there are several different ways to get sexual assault. You were aware of the specific form of sexual assault that he had been accused of.
I was aware of his case, unless I look up someone's case on KSAT or online or request a police report, I don't have access to further details unless I intentionally seek them out myself. Yes, sir.
But you were aware that from the official charges.
I was aware of his official charges. Yes, sir.
You were the official charges, and had you had a chance to see his indictment?
No, sir.
You had not seen the indictment?
No, sir.
Okay. So you were not aware that the indictment accused him specifically of fellatio, male sex organ, female male. You were not aware of that?
No, sir.
Okay. So you had not seen all the police reports that a criminal defendant would at least be aware of if he's represented by a good attorney.
Correct. I had not seen a police
So
report. No,
he
sir.
was much more, you would say it's likely that he was much more of an expert on exactly what he was accused of than you were at the time.
Could you restate the question or rephrase the question? I'm not sure I
Okay, can
understand.
you tell me the approximate date of the statement that you're referring to?
Roughly between February 10th and February 16th
Of 2022.
of 2022.
So are you aware of when he was first arrested in this case?
Like if I looked back, I could tell you the date, but he was on a previous officer caseload that I
So
took
you knew
over.
he'd been on bond for a while.
Correct.
Would it surprise you to know that his case dates back a full year before you believe he made this statement?
It wouldn't surprise me, no, sir.
Right, okay. And in that year, is it reasonable that he would have learned what he was being accused of? That a good attorney would have shared with him what's in the police reports? I mean, does it stand to reason that after a year, a criminal defendant would know what they're accused of?
I think it would stand to reason that initially, right from the beginning, he would know what he was accused of.
So if somebody is talking to you about a complaint and he doesn't specify whether I did this or this is what I'm accused of doing, then you have no way of differentiating in your mind whether he is admitting to anything or simply parroting what's in the allegations. You wouldn't know which is which because you don't know the details of the case. Is that fair?
Could you
I can
say that
slow
again?
down. I can back up a little bit. I'm sorry. I'm getting real complicated. If I was in English class, my teacher would be bleeding blood red all over my sentence. So I'll try again. I'm sorry. If a defendant under your caseload knew what he was being accused of and was aware of what police were saying he did,
Mhm.
and got really frustrated one day, is it possible that he may vent about an accusation in language sounding like a confession, but actually venting about an accusation?
I think it's possible.
Okay.
Yes.
And you didn't ask specific questions. Are you making a confession? You didn't ask that, did you?
No, sir, that's
Okay.
not my job.
I understand. Now, earlier you were saying that in general, nobody has to talk to you, but if somebody is on your caseload, they are required to report in, correct?
Correct.
And if somebody's on your caseload, there are other reasons from time to time that you would have to have, without going into detail, that you would have to have conversations with them just to maintain the relationship and keep everything on the up and up. Is
That's
that right?
Yes, sir.
And if somebody is on pretrial services and has a pretrial services officer, if that pretrial services officer calls them, they're expected to answer the phone, aren't they?
Yes, sir.
When Alex made the statement that he made to you, you cannot tell definitively whether he's talking about an allegation or whether he is bearing his soul and making a confession. I think you already said that. I just want to be really clear. You can't know which one of those two things he was doing by his venting, by his statement.
I don't have any way of knowing that. No, sir.
Just one moment. Before this conversation, had Alexis Morganfield ever shared frustrations about his case with you? Was this the first time he had shared his frustrations with you?
No, sir.
Had he ever shared with you that he believed he was being prosecuted unfairly?
Not that I can recall specific words. No, sir. I mean, I'm sure in some sense, he continuously expressed that he didn't understand why he was on this in the first place, what his case was, or, you know.
So it would be fair to conclude that he believed he was being treated unfairly, at least on some level.
In some cases.
Judge,
when-
it calls for speculation.
Withdrawn. No further questions.
Right, state.
Mr. Stevenson talked about there is a necessity for Mr. Morganfield to communicate with you on certain occasions, right?
That, correct, yes, sir.
And are any of those occasions, hey, let's talk about your offense?
No,
And are any of those occasions you're talking about any underlying facts or even underlying charges necessarily of the case?
no, sir.
As it relates to your conversations with him, are they just related to making sure that he is compliant with conditions of bond?
That's correct, yes, sir.
So none of it has to do with what he's charged with.
No, sir.
It's just what he's
Not my
required
job.
to do.
Correct, yes, sir.
And so in this case, again, did you, any of this conversation that preceded this, did you talk about the charges?
No, sir.
Did you talk about the underlying facts of the case?
No, sir. I don't know them.
Okay.
To this day, I don't.
And that's when he made the statement of how can it be assault if she went down on me?
Correct.
I'll pass the witness.
Officer Barda, I'm sure that there have been many memorable people you've had on your caseload from time to time, and I'm guessing our client has been a memorable person for your caseload. But it seems like frustration can go both ways. Before this conversation that we're talking about here, right before that, did you not iterate to Alexis Morganfield, you're a prisoner, you're a criminal? In your statements right before that happened, having regard with his rights when he had to be home, when he didn't have to be home, did you not say you're a prisoner, you're a criminal, and instigate this?
Not that I recall, no, sir. I don't recall ever calling a defendant a prisoner or a criminal. I
you
even
never-
used the word client and guest, or, yeah, I mean, we're taught to use defendant, but coming from my previous job experience, I use the word client still as much as I can.
So you've never had the need to put a troubled client in their place?
I don't feel the personal need to put clients in their place. No, sir, that's not my job.
No further questions.
So that we're clear here, did you call Mr. Morganfield names?
Not that I recall. No, sir.
Was that always necessarily reciprocated?
No.
And in his frustrations, maybe he's confused. Did he use some, let's phrase it, impolite language towards you?
Not that I recall specifically directly towards myself. The two statements that I did state were the ones that stood out the most. Again, this was in February. The messages are not like they're on an old phone that I'm not able to access, or I would have proof of both of the conversation both ways, but.
I'll pass witness judge.
No further questions.
All right, is this witness excused or subject for recall?
We ask that she be excused.
We agree, Your Honor. Excused.
All right, the rule has been invoked. What that means is you cannot discuss your testimony with anyone except for attorneys for the state and defense. You may step down. State, call your next witness.
Your Honor, at this time, the state rests.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the jury, I'm going to have you come back tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. You may be able to find great parking space because usually people leave at 12 for lunch. So the parking garage may empty out a little bit. But hopefully you will have a nice lunch. Remember what I said. You should have memorized this by now. You are not allowed to discuss the case amongst yourselves. You're not allowed to be thinking about the case. I'll let you know when it's time to deliberate. I don't expect this to be on the news or the media, but if it is, you need to turn it off. And nobody's to do any investigation. Whatever you need to make a decision on this case will come from inside the courtroom. Does everyone understand? All right, and remember to keep your badges properly displayed. And if anyone wants to bring pillows tomorrow, you're more than welcome to. All right, everyone, please rise for the jurors. All right, we can be seated. Defense, are you calling witnesses?
We need to have a conference with our clients, confidential conference with our client where we make that decision.
All right. So is there going to be any thing special asked for the jury charge from either side?
Just, I don't know if it's included, but just as the indecency counts, we ask that sexual contact just be defined in the definitions, just so that we make sure that it says above or below the clothes.
All right, just give me a moment. Everyone have a seat, please. All right, we're going to be back tomorrow with our regular docket at 9 a.m. Then we're going to start this jury trial up at 1.